Worker, I'm the vice president of our club, Franklin Noon Rotary, and I apologize for the casual dress. It's rodeo night, and this is actually rodeo light. I didn't wear my belt. I dialed it down a little bit. Back in November, our club president asked me to look into whether we should do visioning or not. And I wasn't looking for a project. I don't know how it is in y'all's club. I was vice president. I was the only one of 4 executive officers in the club who did not have a pet project. I was planning on coasting most of the year, kind of saving my strength before I got into the rest of my rotation. So I started looking at visioning, and from my experience on the board, and that's why I think board experience is invaluable for the executive officers. I remember when I started, and we had one president, and they would have the things they were really good at and things they weren't so good at. They had things that were important to them, and I was important. And then you get a new president, and you have a completely different set of I don't want to say values, but different set of priorities for sure, and things that you're good at. And we kind of meandered. And we meandered as a club, both in terms of not in terms of how we raise our money. Rodeo is how we raise our money, but in terms of how we spend it for sure. And the things that were important to us, whether we were supporting the international projects, youth projects, or local projects. And a lot of what was happening was people would just bring us ad hoc projects to support, and we either voted them thumbs up, thumbs down, and there didn't seem to be any cohesive, coherent way to approach our philanthropic efforts. So as I started looking into visioning, I started thinking about my past experience with different presidents serving on the board, and I thought, this is a way for us to get on track and to accomplish some things. I went back to the board and said, hey, I think that, and by the way, to get to that point, I made several phone calls, talked to several people who had been through the process. Dan helped me get connected with some folks out in, what's the district number in Knoxville?
6780.
6780, and so, and then talked to some other people in other parts of the country, and just I decided that, hey, this would be great for our club with some caveats. And so what I did is I went back to the board and I said, hey, I think visioning would be great, but if it's done right, in my humble opinion, to get what we're going to need to get out of it, to make it worth the effort that we're going to have to put in it, we need to have a visioning process and separately have a strategic planning process. And I said, so if I'm going to make the motion that we're going to do this, I'm going to make a motion that we do a visioning event, and then 2 weeks later we have a strategic planning session. So I'm going to try to move a little bit more quickly now through it, just for time's sake. So that was accepted. We went and we started looking at how we're going to structure our visioning. Quite frankly, the people in Knoxville helped us out a lot. They've already got the template built out, and they said, hey, here's your size club. You really need to have 30 people. All right, how we choose those 30 people, well, it's kind of up to you, but here's some things to think about. And so in choosing that 30 people, we number one, we wanted to open it up to the club, because we wanted the club to feel like they owned the process. But we encouraged all of our past presidents to participate, much like y'all have done. They're as you indicated, they're an indispensable resource in the club. Everybody on the board was by default going to be on there. So we ended up having another 6 or 7 people, just generally, thought leaders, critical, thought leaders, stakeholders in the club, and we got to our 30. Actually, that night we had 31, and a couple of observers. And so we went through our visioning process. It was a 4.5-hour event. We had facilitators, 4 facilitators that volunteered their time to come from the 6780 district, and it was very nice of them. They traveled long ways. And we got in the room, and they put up the posters. And we actually had fun. They walked us through the process of helping us to prioritize and gain that consensus of what is important to the club. And you can almost say what's important, what's the soul of the club really look like? And based on that, what do we want to accomplish going forward? And so with that, we started that process, and just to let you know, you prioritize. You have only so many of these little stickers that you can put up on these tear-out sheets that are on a wall all around the room. And so you're basically voting with a limited number of votes. And then they'll do a first round. And then you have a different color for a second round, and they'll whittle down the number of possible choices. So at the end of the night, you'll have the output from that visioning process, and you will have come to a conclusion as a club with 30 people being pretty representative of the entire club. You will have come to a conclusion of what's important to our club. What are the things that we're going to prioritize? And so you get the output, and this is our output right here. Now I'll tell you, there was a lot of other things that were voted on, but these are only the things that made that final cut. Okay? And I'll just run through a couple of them. Club attributes, size. Club attributes, the top one was leader in community. In size, I thought this was interesting. Some people threw out numbers of 150, some people threw out 350, some 400, some 250, and we all coalesced not around 250 or 300, but around 200. We're a 150 member club. So we didn't shoot for the moon, but we saw another 50 members as being healthy growth in the club. Club service, strong speakers and programs. I don't think any of us realized how important our speaker program has been to the health of the club, both in health in terms of making people happy, to be members, and in getting people to show up and in getting new members. That, as you can see, that came out of, we realized that we need to continue to commit resources to that. Strong new member orientation. Vocational service. All right, so this is one of the big ones that came out of our visioning process. We decided we want to have a permanent meeting location. Okay, that was also picked up down here in public image. Permanent meeting location and a rodeo museum. Okay. Now we all had an idea that we wanted something like that. It's been bandied around for years and years and years, and we decided as a club that we're going to make this a priority. And so that was a big vocational service. Youth, I guess, other than the rodeo museum, youth through what's going to end up being RALA and through Rotary and through Interact was something that was identified as very important. And I will tell you, up until this point, we haven't identified that as important. Some years we support the program, some years we don't. We had no consistent level of support for either, well, we don't have a Rotary Club, but either Interact or scholarships or anything like that. And quite frankly, I don't think we would have pulled off RALA if we hadn't had this. I think it would have been something we talked about and just never committed resources to. Okay, we identified it as something that's very important, and we picked it back up here. So, community service, build a civic center. Again, that's part of the permanent meeting location. Moving up here, new generation. Okay, so again, you see RALA, you see International Youth Exchange. So one thing we picked up from the visioning process is that as a club, we very much want to commit resources and prioritize supporting our international programs and our youth programs. Okay? And what I saw over the last 4 years leading up to this was what we committed to international seemed to slowly decline over time. And I think we declined, bumped up a year, and then started declining again. So I was happy to see that. So you see New Generations International Service. We came out with some very specific output, i.e. Partnering with a Rotary Club in another country. I'll skip down to fundraising. Rodeo earns $300,000. You know, that might have been one of the most counterproductive goals to come out, because we've all talked about it. Everybody voted for it, but then afterwards, when you start going into a planning process, it's hard to. You know, right now we net about, well, last year 100,000. We think we'll net 125 this year. So that's way out of the park. But I think there's actually some positive things that have come from it. But, you know, you take the good with the bad. I mean, it's not a perfect process, I don't think. So we had biggest rodeo east of Mississippi. So these are more things. You can see it's all about rodeo. Even the Barbecue Society, it's all about rodeo. Rotary Foundation, we want to have all members, Paul Harris Fellows. Foundation, 100% participation in the foundation. Established a planned giving program. That was something that we hadn't talked about before, so that was good output. Public image, again, that meeting location. So that's the output, and over there is just a graphical representation of it. So we finished our visioning process, and then 2 weeks later, we were scheduled for a strategic planning session. And we identified that we were going to do a 5-year strategic plan, and that was an integral part of the visioning process. You can see this helps you prioritize, but that's it. That took 4.5 hours. Okay? So 2 weeks later, we had our strategic planning session. Alan was gracious enough to drive all the way from Nashville to help us facilitate it, and we needed some facilitating. Because I won't say it was contentious, but I mean, it's a full contact sport. Okay? When you're in there, really trying to put hard numbers and hard goals, get it on paper, hard numbers to this visioning process. And it didn't stop there. We spent, 3 hours that night? And we didn't get to everything. And then we had to follow on with just the the full board, and then just the executive board, and then it was the president and me and the incoming president. And then I was out of town, and it was just the two of them, and we whittled on this and whittled on this. We probably put another 10 or 12 hours and just whittling it down and putting it on paper. But that strategic planning process, we got out of that what we needed. And again, thanks to Alan, because we were all over the place. But we got out of that what we needed for a framework for our strategic plan. Okay, and we as a board, there are just some things I think as a board you just got to fill in, right? We wanted to open it up, just like the visioning process. We opened that strategic planning process up to the entire club, and we encouraged our past presidents to participate. I think we had 15 that night, right? 15 or 16. All right, so this is what we came up with. This is our strategic plan. I've got just a few minutes left, so I'm going to breeze through it real quick. One of the things that I think is important for you to know, in the strategic planning process, at the very end, I think we all kind of came to the conclusion, one of the ladies there very presciently said, hey, we're going to need to redo our committee structure. And she said, by the way, I've got it pulled up right here. Here's Rotary International's suggestion. Here's what we have now. We need to try to use this. And that's what we did. She was right. We needed to revise our committee structure to be able to accomplish all that we wanted to accomplish. Our current committee structure was inefficient and wasn't working right. And quite frankly, that's a cornerstone, I think, of what came out of this process for us, is revising our committee structure in such a way as to support the things that are important to us. Okay. First page. Let's go ahead and go on the second page. So here's, this just talks about us going through the process. Let's go ahead and go to the next one if you don't mind. So here's our first strategic plans and responsibilities. Club, this talks about the different responsibilities. The club president's going to appoint, in our case, the club president's going to appoint each board, each committee chairman. That's going to be at the behest of the club president. We're encouraging the club president to pick board members as committee chairman or chairwomen, but they don't have to be board members. Okay. Club vice president is going to be the one that shepherds the 5-year plan. So every year there's going to be one executive team member who is shepherding the strategic plan over the next 5 years. We're going to make some amendments to the club bylaws. This gets into committee structure. So we're going to have a club administration committee. We're going to have a membership committee. For time's sake, I don't think we can go through each one. Public Relations Committee, Service Projects Committee, and each of these paragraphs are subcommittees, okay, and will have their own subcommittee chair, okay. And then Rodeo Committee, because we're a rodeo club, Finance Committee, fundraising, and then we're going to have a separate. We just set up a 501c3 foundations. We're going to have a separate foundation board for that. The reason to include it here was so there's some guidance as to how we budget. All of our money is raised through the rodeo, and all that money goes in to our philanthropic efforts. For the most part, we self-float in terms of what we, the club, the operation expenses of the club in terms of what we bring in for our lunches and whatnot. And so ostensibly, what we net from the rodeo should go to our philanthropic efforts, and that will flow through the foundation. And this just adds some language to our plan so that can be clear, because we're still in the process of setting up our foundation. Okay? Good?